feel like I'm in Star Wars there, don't you, Skene, when we're getting counting down?
In a
So
galaxy far, far away.
exactly. Welcome back to another edition of the Wolverine.com TV show. I'm Chris Balas, with me, Doug Skene, Michigan's former All Big Ten offensive lineman. Skene, I was getting to some film of Iowa from back in the day when you played. It was a long
Oh
time
boy.
ago. Yeah, it wasn't black and white, but it was a while back. And you guys were playing. I was trying to figure out if you'd played in two times in Iowa City or just once. In 1989, you were down there on the extra point team. Michael Taylor scores. Michigan's
Mhm.
quarterback on a keeper, and there's Skene listening to Bo Schembechler in his last year say, "Let's go for one." So you must have been on that point after team, huh?
PAT and field goal with Dallas. Back in the
Yeah.
day, it was tough to crack the lineup when you had a bunch of all
Heck yeah,
Americans
it
in front of
was.
you. So
Yeah. But hey, you were out there and
I was there.
listening to Bo
pink,
Schembechler, and
pink locker room walls and all.
we're going to get to that. So, but first, we're going to talk about Michigan, Maryland, and a weird one, 34-27. You know, the disappointing part of that, really, there were a couple things there. The final drive, they had a couple chances to get off the field. We'll talk about that. You know, I think a third and forever, and then a fourth and something that where the backup quarterback scrambles, and so that was a little disappointing. You know, and to get up to such a hot start. And then to kind of go into a shell, I think they had 163 yards. I tweeted with about 2 minutes to go in the first half. And then Blake Corum ends up ripping one off and they get a couple big plays. So,
Mhm.
but first things first, let's give credit to Maryland, who was better than we thought they were going to be. I think both of us agreed when we were talking. And, you know, a great quarterback who, with the exception of a couple passes that were great picks, number one, really did some nice things. Number two, they've got some athletes up front on both sides of the ball, and they didn't have any turnovers, or not turnovers. They didn't have any penalties. So they had 15
Yeah.
penalties the week before, and I think they had their first penalty with about 2 minutes to go in that game. And I'm looking at the stats right now,
Yeah.
and
They had one
yeah, they had one
penalty
penalty the
for
entire
5
game.
yards.
So,
Yeah.
and so give them credit. They played a great game. Mike Loxley, Maryland's coach, said, "You know what? I don't care. There are no moral victories. It's more about us than them. Whatever. You know what? Give Michigan credit for finding a way." The stats weren't gaudy if you look at them right there: 397 yards and probably 50 or so at the end of the game when Michigan was playing a little bit soft. And you still, again, you would like to see them get off the field on some
Yeah.
of those third downs, 3 of 3 fourth downs. However, a win is a win, and I will say it again, going back to that Rutgers game last year, Skene, they looked like crap, and then they came back and they played pretty well. So I'm gonna the bottom line, you win, right?
Yeah, we're not going to get too excited either way here. I think there's some really good indicators coming out of this game, but absolutely credit to the Maryland football team there. I was listening to Karsh and John's radio broadcast at the end there, and absolutely they're like this Maryland team's going to be interesting to see how they balance out this Big Ten East over here. They're going to give some teams some problems. I'm not sure how much of problems they're going to give, Ohio State, and I'm not so sure what they're going to do against Penn State, and because I'm not so sure how they can defend that rush. Um, but definitely, they've got a quarterback that can make some plays. They got a transfer wideout that came in from Florida that was making plays, and that Maryland team was better than advertised coming in. And I think when you combine that with the fact that Michigan had played three awful football teams, finally they got punched in the mouth. I can't remember what point of the game it was. For the first time all year, they were behind.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching this. I'm going, okay, let's see how they respond. Let's see let's see the body language in that huddle. Do they tighten up? Do they loosen up? And I was pleasantly surprised that Michigan's playmakers across the board in different areas of the team stepped up and started making plays. It wasn't always pretty, though, Ballas. So
Yep.
clearly, this Michigan team, as most teams do, they get into this Big Ten season and there's a lot more on the line. Maryland came in and proved that. And at times we were struggling to block them in the rushing game. And at times we had a hard time getting them off the field defensively. We weren't getting to the quarterback a whole lot in that first
Right.
part of that football game. So he was sitting back there at will doing what he wants. And as we all know in college football, if you can't get to the other quarterback, you're in trouble.
And we're
And
going to talk
so,
about that. Yeah, we'll talk about
yeah,
that pass rush in a minute. But
yeah,
you and I talked off the air here for a second about some of the problems that the Michigan or the Maryland guys up front on defense gave the Michigan offensive line. And two
yeah,
things now: Trevor Keegan didn't play,
yeah,
probably questionable for next week too. So that's disappointing. number one. So you really haven't had one offensive line all year. And Carson Barnhart still nursing from what you understand is a bad ankle. So I was going to ask you, first of all, with these guys and these ankle injuries, how tough is it as an offensive lineman? Everybody's like,
Oh,
tape it up, man.
yeah.
But when you're trying to get that leverage, man, how tough is
It
it to play on
hurts.
a bad ankle?
It,
Yeah.
it depend depending how bad that ankle is mangled,
Yeah.
it hurts because
Hmm.
everything is, all that strength and body weight and everything, plus the weight of the defender transfers down into your feet. And so if it ain't good down there at the ankles down to your big toe, it hurts. So that I can see why, they're holding guys out and to get them better to play another day. And along those lines, at times, the young left guard who we were praising last week for his effort and his tenacity, he got into some matches, and at times he was overmatched. The
Hmm.
young El Hadi, he was stoned at the line of scrimmage a couple times and kind of tossed off a block, and the guy was right there in some key third downs, and we weren't getting push over there. But again, not surprising. He's a young guy, and he'll get those things figured out. I'm watching him closely and running the thing back, and he's a
Yeah.
little bit high, and his feet didn't get going, and his hips didn't get into the block, and I'm like, yeah, I remember those days. It was a long, long time ago for me. When you get into a higher level of competition in a Big Ten game, it's like, oh boy. And so, it's a progression. So there were times out there where it's like, boy, there's a big negative play. And credit to the Maryland defense too, Ballas. I mean, as Michigan moves into this season, and we talked about this coming in, I mentioned it in my prediction for the game. This playbook has to open because I'm watching Michigan run their base offenses where you're blocking down one side and you're pulling guys around to kick the end and somebody for the front side linebacker. Defenses are figuring this out. And as soon as they see that action, defenses are adjusting to allow a front side linebacker to absolutely dart up in there, and that was giving Michigan problems.
Yeah.
And so if Michigan's going to continue to play with a limited playbook, then they're going to be forced to open that stuff up to do some things off of that familiar look, or they're just going to have to block it better. And the second man who's pulling around up in there for the front side linebacker is going to have to understand that dude's not going to be sitting back in there soft. He's probably going to be coming like a bullet, and I'm going to have to meet him in the hole. It looked like at times we weren't ready for that.
Yeah. Did they adjust at all as the game went on, or was it the same thing?
No, I think there was adjustments. I
Hmm.
think, when you play against the first three opponents that we did, and you can come around there and it's like, oh, this is a walk in the park. I can size this guy up and come around the corner, and I get into someone who's, not Big Ten caliber, and I'm going to make that block easily. And all of a sudden, you get into the Big Ten, and all of a sudden, they're scouting you better, and that linebacker's not going to be sitting in there waiting on you. He's going to come up and punch you right in the mouth, and what that means in football, he's going to come up and put his helmet right in your throat.
Yeah.
So it's a different block when you get over to the front side there. And so I saw that a couple times. Zinter had one late in the game where he came over there and he just absolutely got punched right in the mouth, figuratively,
Yep.
and didn't move anybody. And this is the adjustments that Coach Moore will go through with his guys, and they're going to practice this, and they'll tell that demo team to show this stuff as we come in. Certainly this week against Iowa, and so they're going to have to adjust and get cleaner, blocking the stuff they're most familiar with.
Yeah, and we'll get to your question in 1 second, Shadyville03. You know what? It's interesting. It's certainly not a bad thing when you start a football game like they did. You get a fumble on the kickoff, and then you score
Yeah,
in one play. And you're
yeah,
probably thinking, I was turning to Birchie, one of Karsh's buddies there, and one of our buddies, and I said, hey, is it time to wrap this thing up yet? After you score that first
man, yeah,
touchdown, you think
yeah.
maybe Maryland's going to lay down, and that's going to be it. But you know what? They punched back, and give them credit for that. But I think you're
Lots.
right. When you are looking at three patsies like they played initially. And Colorado State, for example, got beat by Sacramento State 41-10.
Yeah.
Okay. And had less rushing yards than they had against Michigan. Then maybe you've got that false sense of security, like, hey, this thing's going to be easy. But
Hmm.
like you said, to their credit, Michigan woke up a little bit too. And really the play of the game for me, one of them was DJ Turner's interception. And I know that they didn't overturn it, and they didn't look at it. Maybe it hit the ground, maybe it didn't, but it was a great play. That was a game changer there. And those are the kinds of plays that you have to make sometimes to escape in games like these.
Well, that's a huge play, and I hated the television broadcaster's commentary on there. Oh, I think that ball was loose. That was an incredible play by that
Hmm.
kid. I mean, that was just an awesome interception. And so that key play, and then Corum's running and his toughness and durability and being able to see things out of his peripheral as he's got that football in those short yardage plays where he busted the first one in the first half, and he just got that knack. He's got that vision to find something the patience when the blocks are setting up, but also when the blocks aren't there to find a crease. And he did both of those things and did them very, very well. And then also there were a couple of short yardage plays where he didn't, have a clean look and he just put his head down and got into a linebacker and still fell forward.
Yep, and
And
that's
that was,
exactly what I was going to bring up. Hassan
yeah,
Haskins, we were wondering if they were going to miss him. It was early in the game. It was a 3rd and 1,
yeah,
and he's got those big legs churning and 2 guys. He pushed backwards and got 2 yards
yeah,
when he needed 1, so I thought that was
yeah.
pretty huge. So,
The question from I forgot who sent the
Shadyville, put it on up
Shady.
there, Chip.
Yeah. So, do we think we should run more with zone blocking schemes? I think that is the curveball. It's a great question,
Mhm.
Shadyville. Uh, Michigan's base offense is this power gap man that we've been talking about now for a couple years, and they do it
Explain
very
that
well.
explain that real quick.
Well, what that means is you got 5 linemen plus a tight end. We're going to have 6 guys. We're going to pick 6 guys to block, and it's going to be combination. Let's say if I'm playing right guard, me and the right tackle are going to take this down lineman to middle linebacker, and between the two of us, we're blocking these 2 guys. Period. And the center's going to block the zero shade. If he's got somebody on his eye, the center's going to block him on one-on-one. And then they're going to pull the backside guard around for the front side linebacker, or pull the backside guard to kick the defensive end. And the backside, maybe a filling tight end or somebody's going to come around for the front side linebacker. Every man is accounted for, is what this basically means. When you switch to zone blocking, you don't know who you're going to end up blocking. Everybody takes a space. So usually what happens in zone blocking is the entire offensive line and tight ends will all step to the left or to the right. And when you do that, you block whoever shows up in your gap. So if you're the center and we're zone blocking left, you have whoever shows up in the left A gap. And the left guard would have whoever shows up in the left B gap. That could be a down lineman who's in that gap already. Could be a down lineman who's over the tackle and stunts into that gap. Could be a linebacker who comes up front side or backside and shows across your face. Whatever shows up in your gap is who you block. And it is the curveball to the Michigan's base offense, which is that power gap stuff.
Yeah.
And then, but you can play action off of it. I would guess in the question about which back would be best suited for it. Corum did really, really well with this last year.
Yeah.
Did outstanding with it. And Edwards has got the athleticism and the speed to do both. I think you could do zone blocking with either one of those guys, and it will be a nice changeup. And as the season goes on and that playbook gets open, I think we'll see some more of it. Last year it was the curveball. It looks like it's going to be again this year.
Yeah, how much did they run last year and how early? I remember seeing it against Washington,
Yeah. Yeah, the
and,
Washington had a lot. There was a few big runs with the
exactly.
wide zone where everybody's going really wide. You're just trying
Yes.
to get to the edge, and
Yep.
you're trying to seal everything to the inside.
And then boom, there's the
Um,
hole, and
and
he's
then
through.
you're right. And the back has to commit. Usually it's 3 steps commitment to the front side of the play. So if the zone blocking is going left, the back has to take 3 steps before he's allowed to cut it back.
Okay.
And the reason that's important is because those linebackers are watching that flow, and the linebackers will start to flow this way. And if you can get those linebackers flowing, then you give your linemen a chance to get on them, and then you can cut it backside, and it might be huge. So zone blocking is, from a lineman's point of view, even a tight end, it's a lot of fun when you have a back that understands how to take advantage of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then both of these guys that Michigan has back there can do that.
Assuming Donovan Edwards comes back next week and sat out again this week. So, going to be very interesting to see if they can get him back because they need him. I mean,
Yeah.
Blake Corum, 30 carries, and I love this kid. You know what? But you don't want him getting beat up. And you know what? I say that, but remember, Hassan Haskins had several games last year where he was the bell cow. And I think that Blake Corum is certainly capable with the amount of time that he puts it in the weight room. You can see it. But
Yeah.
against Iowa, they're going to have to do something different, Skene. And Bud, we're going to get to your question in just a minute, but when I talk about Corum here, the good news about him, Skene, is that he's not getting caught for yards for loss or anything either. So these guys seem to be doing a little bit better job here in the last week or two, especially up front. Even though they're mixing and matching there on the offensive line, but Blake Corum to me, on first of all, on the first touchdown right before the half that put them up 17-13, that was a quick one, and you know what, that generally hasn't worked real well for them when they rush to the line and they try to
Mhm.
catch somebody off guard. This time it did, and Blake even said they weren't set. I thought that worked to their advantage. It was a huge play in the game.
Well, it appeared that's because I was sitting watching that part of the game, like call
Hmm.
timeout, call timeout, call timeout. The play gets snapped and off goes Corum, and
Yeah.
the guy was sitting there watching. He's like, "Boy, you sound like an idiot right now." I was like, "Well, you know what? I am an idiot sometimes." So, but it was clear that Michigan had two plays called going into that set right there, right? So they ran the previous play, didn't get what they wanted, and they were here they go, and I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, we're going to get a penalty. We're not going to be set." And so they called the play and Corum saw the leak off the left side there because there was nothing in the middle, and off he went. And so if that was by design, then good for him. Corum showed a lot of gut and grit in that football game. Reminded me of obviously Haskins last year, but going back to the Chris Perry at Michigan State. Remember that one, Balas, years
52
ago?
carries. Yeah.
52 carries, unbelievable stuff. So this is not new and different. Corum obviously is up to the challenge. He's going to be asked to do a lot this week. And so, when you have that many rushing yards and that kind of success, the question that was put up there a minute ago from one of the watchers here was, play action off of it. Yeah, it's you would think you'd see a lot more of that.
Yeah.
And play action only works when you're good at running football plays on the ground. And Michigan was doing that. Although I felt like at times it was the Blake Corum show because just like that touchdown right before the half, if that thing was meant to go between the tackles, that's not where it went for the touchdown because there was no room between the tackles. So Corum was making yards up where he found them,
Right.
not always where it was supposed to be. But I was a little surprised at the lack of the play action too. A lot of pocket stuff in there, and then of course the read zone stuff, which is a threat when JJ's got the ball in his hands.
Yeah, and you got to be careful now with Cade McNamara out because you are one play away from Davis Warren or Alan Bowman and guys who have not played a lot in the Big Ten. Alan Bowman has some experience, obviously, at Texas Tech,
Yeah,
but these guys are neck and neck, folks. It's from what we heard last week from our sources inside Schembeckler Hall. They didn't announce a backup, but those guys got about the same amount of reps, and then you got Alex Orji too. But with those freshmen, especially on the road, we saw with C.J. Stokes, the running back, he fumbled. We didn't see him again. So
yeah.
you've got to stick with your guys at Iowa, and your hope that
Well,
JJ McCarthy is told if you're going to be keeping on the read option, you better get down, son, against
well,
this
there's
this
this.
defense.
So I got to be honest. Let's talk about this quarterback play a little bit from the game against Maryland. Ballas. At times I was like, where is McNamara? Where's the McNamara part of McCarthy? Get rid of the football.
Right.
You can't run around all back there. Turn your back to your tackle, flip around, go backwards, backwards, backwards. And this is the stuff that makes me nervous.
Yeah.
And there were a couple plays where it's like, dude, just throw it in the dirt. Let's live for another play. But he's trying to extend, extend, extend. And I think when quarterbacks get greedy, the law of averages can stand up and bite you right in the butt. And it did on the one play where luckily we got the ball back when
Right.
it was considered a fumble or
It
when
was.
he put the ball on the ground. I thought the ball would be called dead there. But and then there was another play later in the game where it was a beautiful pocket, 1001, 1002, 1003, and it's like, dude, you got to throw it. You got to throw it. And then I think it was Corum, one of the backs, lost his block. It was 4 seconds in, and he still has the football in his
Yeah.
hand. Dude, you don't get that kind of time. And I don't
No.
care how good that offensive line is. You got to get rid of the football, and the wide receivers got to get open. So that part concerns me a little bit with a quarterback that's getting a little greedy, counting on his athleticism, maybe a little bit. And I know after the one play there where he put the ball on the ground, it was ruled a
Yeah.
fumble there. I saw Sharon Moore come up and have a little chat with JJ on the sideline. I'm thinking that coach right there, Coach Moore's got to be telling him, "We love you. We love your athleticism. Don't do that anymore."
Yeah, we didn't see it in the second half. And you know who used to do that, right? It was Jim Harbaugh. He was a
Right.
riverboat gambler back there running around all over the place. So, but
I
even
know.
Jim's got to be telling him, hey, and that's why they liked Cade McNamara last year. You had some riverboat gambler and JJ McCarthy. So,
Yeah.
and on that one play specifically, I think it was a 2nd and 10 play, they were in field goal range. That takes them out of field goal range,
Yeah.
and very fortunate to get that ball back because the Maryland guy was close to it. So, two on
Yeah.
the ground. He had one bad pass that probably should have been picked. It was really close in the end zone, but at the same time, this is his third start, folks. So, and you look
Yeah.
at the numbers 18 of 26 for 220 and 2 touchdowns, 69%. So he's not going to be perfect, but a couple things that he needs to do better. Uh,
Yeah.
Number one, is, and Charles Woodson told him this after the game. He said, "Look, son, when you got that room, man, if you're running four verts and everybody's downfield, and they're rushing four guys, and you get all that time, and you got the middle of the field, use your
Go.
legs, use your
You got to go.
God-given talent." And he
That's
has
right.
not done much of that. You can always slide and get down, right? So that's
Yeah.
number one. Number two, I like him better when they're rolling him out right now. You know what?
Yes.
And it seems to me that he's scanning the field, and I don't think it was entirely his fault. There were a lot of times that guys just weren't open. So, but exactly what Shadyville says, get that
Yeah.
out of that pocket by design. When he's rolling out, man,
Yep.
and he's looking downfield, boy, that ball's on the money, and I like him when he's moving.
He's really athletic on the run, especially when it goes to his right, right? Obviously being a right-handed guy, so maybe when you're on the left hash, you do some of that stuff or middle of the field, and so you can do that. And it also by design, it takes away a third or more of the football field when he's rolling to his right. By rule, quarterbacks are never supposed to throw back across the field.
Right.
And it's just a cardinal sin of quarterbacking. You're never supposed to do that. But I think I agree with you, Balas. He's comfortable when he's doing that. He's got, if there's nothing there, if you got your short, mid, and deep. If there's nothing there, he can always tuck it and scurry up in there for whatever he can get. But Charles is right. When you see defenses like that, take off and do it. But you mentioned this is only his third start or
Right.
fourth start, right? This is
Right.
third start,
Third
fourth
start.
start.
Yeah. Third.
Third, I'm sorry, because I
Yep.
forgot about week one.
Right.
It's game 4, third start.
Yep.
Remember, his first 2 starts were against terrible football teams, Bal.
They were
Terrible.
Scrimmages.
So this was
Absolutely.
the first start against somebody who was giving him some real heat and some real action. So this game was far more of a learning curve for this young quarterback than the other 2 combined.
Yep, and 69% completion percentage. You know what? He was at 80 something percent. That wasn't gonna happen. Now the ones that he did miss, Skene, are balls that he said he wanted to have back. He missed some deep balls
Deep
where
balls.
he had a
Yeah.
couple guys, and
Yeah.
that was kind of the knock on Cade McNamara last year was, you got to
Oh,
hit
yeah.
these guys in
Yeah.
stride. At the same time, guys, it's not a high percentage pass. Number one, that's what you got to remember. Number two, it's not like these guys were 10 yards behind the defenders.
Yeah.
With one exception, and that was
Yeah.
Ronnie Bell on a 3rd and 2 play. And generally, I do not like the all or nothing approach on 3rd and 2. If you're a Lions fan, you know what I'm talking about today. A 3rd and 1, you don't even want to know. You probably don't even know Skene
Balas,
how they look.
Balas, I'm in on the Lions, man. I sat here
Yeah,
watching this game, and
I know.
the game ended, and I'm sitting there watching with my son, and it's like, so this is what it's like to be a
This
Lions
is what
fan.
it's like to be a Lions fan.
I
And I
don't want
told
any
these
part of
guys,
this.
no. And if it weren't raining and wet out there, even with Hutch, I would have put it on there. And Hutch was a little quiet today. I would have been out there golfing with you, But,
Yeah,
and that's what I said, you know what? You can't invest in these guys. They're going to break your heart. But regardless, on the 3rd and 2 pass to Ronnie Bell's about 10 yards behind the guy. Makes it, that's a huge play in the football game. But that's one area where he's got to put a little bit more underneath the ball. And he said,
yeah,
this is the best my arms felt in a long time. Those are plays he's going to make, in my opinion.
yeah, and you're absolutely right. So a year
Yeah.
ago, everybody was like, "Oh, McCarthy can't hit or McNamara can't
McNamara.
hit the deep ball. He can't do this. We want JJ in there." And I'm like, "Okay, this is a little harder than it looks, right?" Because
Hmm.
I think Roman Wilson was open on a couple, and he just missed the stride, and off he went. So I think this coaching staff will coach this young guy to play within the guardrails of his capabilities and try not to do things that are outside of him. It's going to be required Saturday at Iowa and in future games. Yes, you are physically capable of doing some special things. It doesn't mean you should try all the time.
Right. Now, Blake Corum had one 47-yarder, I think it was, where he bounced outside too. It didn't look like there was anything in there. How did the line do run blocking? 243 yards indicates that he got some
Oh
stuff
yeah,
between the tackles too, and these guys were doing
yeah.
well. Now, the big runs might not have been on them, but they had their moments.
No, Ballas, I'd say a bit streaky, but you cannot deny the effectiveness on the ground. It was very good. But at other times, is what really registers on me is I was like, man, that's a tackle for loss. Where guys getting
Hmm.
tackled or avoiding defenders 2 yards in the backfield. Well, that's got to be cleaned up. That's got to be eliminated to be a championship team. You got to get rid of that stuff. And so, but all in all, I thought that the Michigan offensive line blocked pretty doggone well. I thought the tight ends in there, Schoonmaker and the young, Bredesen that's in there. The kid's blocking pretty hard, and I'm like, okay, this clearly there's still plenty to work with here in this offensive front, but yet it's not perfect, right? And
Yeah.
we talked about the young left guard earlier, but even Zinter got missed a couple in there, and again the standard is very, very high. If you're an offensive lineman, you always want to grade out at 80% or higher, which used to get you in the Victors Club for the week, and you got to wear the special jersey and practice and all that stuff. And I would say this last week, I would say most of those guys probably did grade out at 80 or more because they played really well. I just get greedy when I see the tackles for loss in key situations or on third downs. And the stat that was up earlier, third down, I think we were 5 of 12. And so you got to stay away from third and longs. How do you stay away from third and long? Don't have negative plays on first and second down.
Yeah.
And some of that stuff was on the Michigan offensive line. So you gotta avoid that stuff here as these games get tougher.
Yeah, 22 first downs. So what the jersey look like? Like have a gold star on there or something that says smiley face?
It was navy blue. And just so you know, so the way Michigan practices, and I still think Jim still does it today, the offense wears the colors of the home or the away, wherever we're playing. Like, so for the first month of the season, the offense is always wearing blue, and the defense has to wear white. And then when now it's Iowa week, so the offense will wear white and the defense will have to wear blue in practice. Well, back in the day, if you made the Victors Club, you got to wear a special navy blue jersey. It had a gold. It looked like a helmet sticker, Balas, the old school helmet stickers, which is on my helmet sitting up here.
Yeah.
And it said in big old letters across the top, Victors Club, right? And it was like a little piece of pride out there for the week. And if you're one of the guys without a Victors Club jersey on, it was like, boy, man,
I want to be there. Yeah, you want to be there. So interesting stuff. It's good stuff. So overall, the line played pretty well. How about the defensive line? I thought they were leaky, and I've said this all year. I want to see how they're going to do against teams that line up against them. Iowa. We'll get to Iowa in a second, but they are not a great running team, but they are a very physical team. And I've thought at a few times until they really challenged Mozzie Smith. I thought Mozzie Smith was at a standstill a few times. She's a chance to be dominant and will need to be in a game like Iowa, but it concerns me a little bit that they aren't getting off blocks at times and 5-6 yards a pop there at times, especially in the second half.
That was the second half, and that first half drive after Maryland got settled down after the big turnover there. It was a 75-yard drive, Balas.
Yeah.
And they were just coming right at Michigan at times. And I'm like, okay, D-line, they're clearly challenging you here. It's time to see somebody make some plays. And on that particular drive, it was right down the field, cramming it down your throat, and here we go. And then Maryland had success in different parts of the football game doing some of the same exact things. And so again, this is the first time we're seeing Michigan play against a quality offensive line. Not a great offensive line, but an above average offensive line in Maryland. As a couple guys in there are pretty doggone good.
They're going to be pros. There's no doubt.
Yeah, there's a couple. I think the right tackle kid looked pretty good, and I can't remember it was left guard but Maryland's got some offensive linemen now, so I'm watching this defensive line. They're interacting with a real opponent, and I think there's an adjustment period. Again, the first three opponents we played, I keep saying this, they were terrible. And so that Michigan defensive line was having its way. So after Michigan's defensive line had that done to them, I thought, all right, how are they going to respond? What are they going to look like here? And to their credit, they got it going, started doing some things, causing disruption, got to the quarterback there, absolutely drilled him and buried him at the 50-yard line almost. That kid got destroyed.
Yeah.
And so they started putting heat on him. And this is what happens. You have to raise your game in these moments. And I thought the Michigan defensive line adjusted well, although clearly at times was just flat out getting blocked.
Yeah, and Talia, somebody posted there that it's going to be the most mobile quarterback until Stroud. Stroud's really not that guy, but I tell you who is, Sean Clifford, my boy Hutch's quarterback, is going to be moving out of the pocket, going to be like another running back in there sometimes. So you've got him to look forward to, and it's going to be interesting. So how concerned are we, Skene, about the pass rush here? Because with four guys, they were struggling at times. There's no question. I didn't see guys with moves until the end of the game. And I really expected to see more of Derek Moore and Iyabi Oki now is his name instead of Anoma. I really thought these guys being from Maryland, they're going to get him in there in some pass rushing situations where these guys are going to be pretty good. And at the end of the game, Derek Moore gets a sack. But these other guys, the moves are bull rush moves, and I'm not seeing anything else. I'm seeing
bull rush is
There's no
Yeah, there's
second move there.
so the diversity of a defensive lineman's moves is it can be often his strength. So if you're not a dominant, just physical force, and you can't just run people over, you need to have two or three pitches to throw at an opposing offensive lineman, whether it's a drop the shoulder rip move or a swim move. We haven't seen any spin moves, right? Last
No,
year, Ajabo was so good at that. Spin moves are tough to do, but you watch that defensive line on obvious passing downs. It's like, okay, I'm going to zero in on this side of the line and see what they can do over there. And yeah, I saw a lot of guys making it easy for offensive linemen. As an offensive lineman, and I set up to block you, and you just come in and just kind of bull rush me, you know, unless you've got some pop and you've got me off balance, again, we'll use the gold standard of last year with Hutch and Ajabo. They had so many good moves to make you nervous about speed stuff. If you're thinking speed, 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 then all of a sudden you hit me with a bull rush, yeah, you can knock me right in my butt.
right.
But if you don't have those moves, bull rush for me, I got you all day long, man.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna post my inside hand right in your inside armpit, and I got you all day. And so, you know, you better be able to develop some things. So it just, the bull rush and simply straight ahead pass rushing, he could not make it easier on me as an offensive lineman. And I saw too much of that at times.
Yep.
There was no pass rush, and that's why that kid earlier in that football game was doing whatever he wanted. And as we've seen from other football games around the Big Ten, if you can't get to the quarterback, you are in for a long day.
Yeah, especially against Ohio State. You look at Wisconsin with their
Mm-hmm.
trumped up defense and everything else, and oh, they're going to give them a hard time. Well, they didn't. So you're going to have to get something there because if you're blitzing on every third down, and that's exactly what Maryland coach Mike Loxley said, we want to stay out of those positions because they have some exotic blitz packages. But if they're not using those packages because you know what, then they're just going to have all day to throw if you can't get there with
Oh
four
man!
guys, and
And
that's
if you
exactly
get
what happened.
to the upper echelon of the Big Ten and some of these quarterbacks, if they have that kind of time, you're going to get smoked.
Yep. So let's see more and more of Oki, and let's talk a little bit about more or more and Oki. It's again, it's not a Noma anymore. It's a Yabi Oki, but that secondary I thought played fantastic at times, considering how much time he had to throw. Jamon Green's been an absolute revelation this year. He's been fantastic. DJ Turner had the big play. RJ Moten, but we aren't talking a ton about these guys. Yeah, there were a couple times that they lost communication, especially at the end of the game there, but I think these guys have been kind of the pleasant surprise of this team.
Yeah, and you know what I like watching about that part of the football team, Bows? They look like they're having fun back
Yeah.
there. I mean, these guys, the body language is great. They celebrate together when they make plays. These are all the indicators of a good solid huddle. Guys that enjoy playing next to each other and they're communicating. So on the back end, that's great. They're going to need that defensive lineman to help them out more in the
Yep.
coming weeks.
Yes, exactly. So hopefully they get a linebacker back too. Nikai Hill Green missed another game, so they need a little bit more depth there. And Junior Colson, I thought, got blocked a little bit. He had 13 tackles, but there were times that the offensive line got to him. Regardless, as somebody just posted, a win is a win. Don't
Yep.
care. You look at USC struggled to beat Oregon State in the last minute. You look at, let's see, look at all the upsets and poor play by other teams this weekend. 100% Shane. Look at
Yeah.
Kansas State goes in there with Nebraska's cast off quarterback and beats Oklahoma. How do you think that made Nebraska fans feel, by the way? They're cast off.
Yikes.
He goes to
Yeah,
Kansas
boy.
State and has 5 touchdowns and beats Oklahoma, who was number 6 at the time.
Can they fire Scott Frost again? Can they fire him
That would be
again?
great. I'll ask his mother. And Carol and I have a relationship there, a nice relationship. So let's talk now, move ahead to Iowa, because again, it's hilarious. You and I both predicted at the football summit with Huge up north when we were golfing at Tullymore, which by the way is fantastic. We'll be back there again in October. That Iowa is going to get better and they are going to be a tougher matchup than anybody thinks. And everybody says, "Oh, you're stupid. You're old guys." You know what? We've been called by the way in some of the comments, so we really appreciate
We
those,
we are
especially.
old guys.
Yeah, well, middle. They said middle aged to old, and I'm trying to figure out where we where we fall. So, but thanks for the compliment, Junior. We appreciate that. So, but here's the thing: you've played in 2 of those games at Iowa, okay?
Mhm.
And the 2 games that you played in might have been the biggest spreads in the last 40 years at Iowa because it is not an easy place to play,
Mm-mm.
and especially defensively. You look at those guys; some of the plays they made 2 defensive touchdowns again against Rutgers. So
Mhm.
everybody's like, "Oh, they only had 300 and something yards of offense and averaged 3.8 yards per carry." You know what? It's going to be a low-scoring, ugly game that they're going to try to get you into, and they're going to try to make your young quarterback make mistakes. To me, that is going to be an absolute war. I think Michigan's favored by 9.5. Maybe Hutch can help me out with that, but I see one of those games that's going to be, maybe if you're lucky, 24-10, 24-13, or something like that.
Well, I think the scoring probably will be in there because their defense is legit. But just a word about what it's like to play in Iowa City as a Michigan
Yes.
Wolverine. Not an easy place. So
Yeah.
outside of Columbus, East Lansing, Iowa's away game is as tough as they get. You know, you'll hear they'll talk about it on television. The fans are right on top of you, and they are. They're very very close to where the activities are going on that bench. They're vocal, and Iowa has traditionally over the decades. When Michigan comes to town, it's been a dogfight. It's not going to be an easy victory, not by any stretch at all. And so, I don't really care if Iowa's offense has been struggling. I guarantee you, Iowa's looked at that Maryland game tape already, and they're saying we can run the football on this Michigan defense. We can
Yeah.
do this,
And they're going to use the tight ends,
and
as
they're
you
going to
know.
and they're going to
That's
block, and they're just going to do what Iowa does, which is get their feet in the ground and get their big old hands on you, and they're going to block you. And so Michigan had better be ready for the old full line drill for 3.5 hours, where it's just between the tackles football, and then a play action off of there, because that's Iowa's deal against us. It's going to be on Saturday, and it's not an easy fight. And
yeah.
so, and offensively, yeah, they're going to take that defense, and they're going to see again the scary part about JJ trying to improvise and extend plays and all that. I think defensive coordinators love that,
Yeah.
and so if the Iowa secondary can lock up our receivers and make JJ start to make things up back there, I don't think that bodes well for us in a big noisy road game. We've got to get that ball out of there in 3 seconds or less, preferably about 2.5 seconds or less. And those receivers are going to have to get open. It's going to be a difficult football game to win,
that,
Ballas.
that that defense makes you make mistakes. They want you to make mistakes. They make you drive the field. Don't want to give up the big plays, and they don't. So when I hear these people talk, well, you got to let JJ just sling it and do his thing, and don't be conservative. And I'm thinking that's exactly how you're going to lose this game is by putting a kid in there in his first big road start in that stadium and telling him, hey, go win the game yourself. That is not
Well,
what you want.
I'm all right with letting JJ sling it if guys are open.
Right. Right.
But at times guys weren't open. I mean, there's a
Right.
reason he's standing back in there holding the ball for four
Right.
seconds because guys aren't getting open. And so,
And
and the other,
how much of that is scheme though? Is scheme too? That bothers me because when you're watching Ohio State and you're watching some of these other teams, receivers are getting open. These guys aren't getting open. Is that routes? Is that
it's I think it could be a combination,
hmm
Ballas. Route running itself is a discipline, and the greatest of those route runners are the guys that are using the head fake and they're planting the foot and they're using their eyeballs to make safeties do different certain things, and it's an art form altogether. That's part of it. Schematically speaking, how much rub routes do we do? How
right?
much crossing are we going to use? We're going to use that back judge right there as a goalpost and use him as a pick person, as every other college football team in America does and does very, very well. Michigan's doing some of that, absolutely. So that'll be part of it. But there's a moment in every football game where it's like, dude, it's me versus you. I got to get open. You're up in press man coverage on me, and I'm going to have to get physical to get off of this line of scrimmage and get away from you to help my quarterback get rid of this football on time. And
Yep.
if I can't do that, you're hanging him out to dry. And
Yep.
so that's the challenge on the edge of the offense, just as the challenge is in the middle of that offense trying to pass block those defensive linemen.
Over under 80 yards for Blake Corum on Saturday.
I take the over on that. I
Okay.
like that kid. He's too
Yeah, me
tough to
too.
be. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's doing pretty well. Hopefully Donovan Edwards comes back too. You can't have a freshman in there, CJ Stokes, who fumbled in his first carry and didn't see the field again.
You know,
You
it's
know,
it's funny because you said that, Ballas, because that play happened and I watched it and he just lost control of the football
yep,
and the friend that I was sitting there watching the game with, I said, well, if Michigan football is anything like I remember it, that kid is done for the day.
yep,
And sure enough, he was.
absolutely. Jamie
I'm,
Morris.
yeah,
Yep.
I'm laughing now. I'm not laughing at the young man
No,
because
no,
he's doing his
it
best, but that's
happens.
that's the way it's supposed to be. Hey, if you're a
Yep.
running back, you put the ball on the ground, you don't get to play. See you next
Right.
week,
Yep.
maybe.
Yep.
Yep.
And that Bo Schembechler, Jamie Morris talks about that all the time. There were a couple of Ohio State games, in fact, where he put the ball on the ground, and I think Michigan State in 1984 when Jim Harbaugh broke his arm, where you didn't see the field again after that. So
Yeah, you're done.
now they aren't as deep as they used to be. That's the
Correct.
issue here. So
Yeah.
you got to
Yeah.
get Donovan Edwards back and get him
Hmm.
involved in that passing game too. I'm hoping that they open up the playbook a little bit. We see some more zone blocking, A. B, that we see maybe some more involvement with the backs out of the backfield. We haven't seen a lot of that. I think that Donovan Edwards can be a
Backside of the backfield. I
factor
like the
there.
tight end action. We're seeing
Yeah,
more of
me
that
too.
boot action. We're seeing
Yep,
some of that backfield boot action with these tight ends and front
yep.
side, one or two layers. And I know it sucks that Eric All didn't play, but we've got talent at the tight end position that can catch the football and go. So that's definitely part of the offensive weaponry.
Yeah, and Jim Harbaugh said he didn't have an update on Eric All, folks. We're not optimistic on that one for a while, so I don't think there's any way you'll see him on Saturday. However, you did talk about Bredesen stepped up, so they've got
Yeah,
some guys there. Colston Loveland is a kid that can catch the ball as a true freshman, and Schoonmaker, 72 yards, really like that kid.
yeah.
Showed some good stuff. So, hey, he slid in there, right? The expectations
Hmm.
for the position, right? That's the cliche, but
Yeah.
it's absolutely true.
Yep, and
So,
he did a really nice job. And again, the blocking is coming along. The young Bredesen, the kid there, I think he's not physically as imposing as Schoonmaker, but well, he was trying his tail off there, Ballas.
yeah,
He's just fighting in there, and he had a couple key blocks in some big situations. So
yes, he
that's
did.
good stuff. We got some depth over there at tight end. That's good.
Yep. Let's talk real quick about the pink locker rooms. Do you remember the first time you went in there? Was it
Yes,
true that he put the butcher block paper or the newspaper over the pink? Or
that is true.
okay,
When we got there, we walked into the locker room. In the locker room, we had those paper, like the big wide sheets of paper. It was like
yeah,
butcher paper
yeah,
with the old white athletic tape all over the place. And I was like, and I had forgotten about it by the time
yeah,
I got in there. So I walked in. I'm like, what's up with that? And I went over and grabbed a piece and looked up underneath. I'm like, oh yeah, pink walls. And at that time we were just like, whatever,
yeah,
it just didn't matter. So
yeah.
I think that's more of it's just an old story thing. I don't know. Coach Fry used to do that, and allegedly it had an effect on the opponents. It didn't have an effect on us.
No, it didn't. You guys went out
No.
and smoked them. I think 26-12 in 1989. Best job ever blocking on extra points by this guy right here. We'll pop the tape in. I think Hutch has tape. No,
Step
Hutch.
inside, get that shoulder down.
Yeah, yep. And then in 1991, you guys went up there and won 43-24. Jesse, that's pretty much that and sticks of gum that Bo Schembechler used to give him. So Hayden Fry
Yeah.
was a great football coach and really
Yes,
got
he
Iowa
was.
back. And I
Yep.
have a lot of respect for that program. We'll talk about that too in a second. But 43-24, Jesse House, Cat Johnson, you guys smoked him down there. Did you play a
Mhm.
lot in that game? Do you remember?
I don't remember that one. I
Yeah,
remember, I remember, unfortunately, our senior year tying them at home,
yeah,
where we again, turned the ball over too many times. But every Iowa game, whether I was standing on the sideline watching those older guys play when we were young, or by the time I got there out there and played, Iowa is not an easy football game. Those dudes play hard. And Kurt Ferentz, the head coach, has been there forever now since Coach Fry has just continued it along. Coach Ferentz is an old offensive line coach. He's an old school grinder kind of guy, and his teams are tough.
yep, they sure are. And it was not Iowa that you tied. You actually tied Iowa your first year at Iowa, I believe, in 1988 when Tracy Williams fumbled at the 1 yard line, if I'm not mistaken. And it
I
was
thought we tied.
Illinois. No, it was
It was
Illinois.
Illinois. It was Illinois.
Sure
I'm sorry,
was.
you're
Yeah.
right. It was
Yep.
Iowa. We lost to Iowa the week after we lost to Michigan State
In
in
1990.
1990. That's right.
Yes.
That was the game I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Sorry for correcting me. I'm
That's
getting
okay.
old. I'm an old
That's
guy
okay.
now, Ballas.
I
Right?
know
This is
we're going
what.
to see
So,
this in the comments, and I'm going to have to go through and delete all these again about what dinosaurs we are. And I think Skene's like a half a year older than me. I'm not positive, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. We'll have to play that out. But all right, so your prediction on the Iowa game, I like Michigan to win. I think it's going to be tighter than people think. Michigan's a 10-point favorite, and I don't like Michigan to cover in this game. And I think that Iowa's going to play its best game of the year, and
Hmm.
they are really challenged offensively, but they're going to try to shorten the game. They're going to try to run a little bit, play action with the tight end. Got a
Hmm.
terrible quarterback, flat out. I'll say it. Iowa fans would say it too, but it's going to be a tough one.
It always is. A one possession game, sure. I know they're 10 points, sure. That's two possessions right there. But if Michigan gets out of there with a one possession victory, which I could absolutely see happening, I'll be super happy with the W and we can move on because just like Maryland was a real taste of Big Ten football play with a much better team than the first three we played against combined, this Iowa team, in spite of the fact that their offense looks terrible on paper, don't 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 fall for that, Ballas. All you Michigan fans out there, don't fall for that. Iowa's going to play tough.
Yeah, they are. And speaking of one more rival, Michigan State. Wow. Minnesota's looking pretty
Yeah,
good, but
yeah.
they look broken. Michigan State looks a little broken right now.
Row the Boat is a real football program, Ballas, and
Yep.
so we talked about it last week, and we giggled about Row the Boat. The guy can
Hmm.
coach football, right?
Yep.
So Minnesota looks pretty good, and Michigan State, hey, it ain't rocket science, Ballas. If you can't get to a quarterback and cause problems, you are in for a long day. And then when your quarterback gives the ball away with 2 picks and I think a fumble in that
Yep.
game, that is a recipe for a butt kicking every day of the week. And so Michigan State's got some problems right now. It'll be fascinating to see how they pick it up. I don't know who they have this week coming up. Do you know
At
who they play?
Maryland. At
At
Maryland.
Maryland. Oh, that'll be a little dicey. Yeah,
That's a lot dicey.
that could be real dicey
I think
because
Talia is going to just tear him up at the year.
I think that's, again, that kid can play. He's got some legs. He can do some things. And Michigan State, they may be looking down the barrel of a long football season here. But then, of course, they're going to come to Ann Arbor and play like Super Bowl champions when they play us. Mark my words on that one.
Yep.
But right now, they're struggling a little bit for
Yeah,
sure.
They're struggling a lot right now. It looks like Ohio State, maybe Michigan, Penn State, and then everybody else, right? And
Penn
Minnesota,
State,
and
watch out for
Minnesota
Penn
too.
State, man. I
Yep.
know Penn State is quietly sitting over there and thinking no one's paying attention to us. It's all about Michigan, Ohio State. Penn State will have something to say about this thing too.
Yep, they sure will. Before we leave, anything bad you want to say about former punter Chris Stapleton this week? No.
I didn't say anything bad about him last
No,
week.
that's exactly.
No,
That's the
no,
problem. Nothing.
no. It's Stapleton's the greatest punter in Michigan football history.
Okay. All right.
Chris Stapleton,
All right.
and had the greatest of mullets back in the
Yes, he
day
did. It
too.
was
In
God.
the
It
mullet,
flowed.
and I think he had this. I think he had the stash too.
Oh, I
That
hope
was.
so.
I
If
think
that's true, Stapes,
if we
then we
could
need a
go back,
picture.
you know what? I could look up here in the old programs I got sitting up here, and I'm going to look that up and
Yeah.
see if Stapleton for next week, Ballas. I'll have the photograph ready for
Yes.
Stapleton from the early '90s and see what that dude looked like. But I think it was straight on, Joe
Yeah.
Dirt. I'm like, not
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
long as Joe Dirt, but
Yeah.
it was Joe Dirt ish.
Straight out of a Beastie Boys sabotage video. So, and next week, hopefully, we'll get to John Jansen. We ran out of time today, John. Sorry about that. We hope to get to you next week. So, we appreciate that. But everybody, thanks for listening. Give us a like if you would. Our producer, Hutch, thanks so much. And we'll do it again next week, hopefully, after a Michigan win.
All right, go blue.